So hopefully everybody can see that. So yeah, thank you everybody for registering to attend this webinar today, part of the Reuse Now campaign, and thank you obviously to the speakers here as part of our panel. A big thank you also to the Reuse Now campaign sponsors, our gold sponsors, Cleveland Steel and Tubes, and our bronze sponsors are Excess Materials Exchange, Optima and Reusefully. So the agenda today, I'm just going to do a really quick introduction. Gilli is then going to, I don't know, Jill, sorry, Gilli, missed off your eye there, is going to do, start off the session talking about a bit of an overview of pre-demolition audits, but particularly from a regulatory and policy perspective. And then Elodie is going to talk about the French policies and systems, and then Julius from Concular is going to talk about it from a German perspective, and then we'll finish up with Rob from Material Index and bringing in a bit more of a UK perspective and how they've developed their pre-demolition audits over the period of time they've been doing them. And then we're also it's great to have Emily on board as well from British Land, who's just going to give a bit of a client's point of view to finish off the panel presentations, and then we should have a decent amount of time then for Q&A at the end of the session. So if you can put your questions into the Q&A, not the chat, please, so that we can keep an eye on those. That also means then you can upvote and comment on other people's questions, which you're not able to do in chat. Please don't use the raise hand option. If you want to ask any questions, Larry, who is helping from a tech perspective, will be able to unmute you. You can ask the questions yourself, or we're happy to ask questions on your behalf. If you do have any tech problems, please just drop Larry a note in the chat. And as you probably already noticed, we are recording this webinar. So if you don't want to get on the audio to be recorded and don't want your video on as part of your questions, then if you just put send anonymous when you add your question to the Q&A, and we'll ask it on your behalf. So a really quick overview on what the Reuse Now campaign is for anybody that's not aware. It's a campaign that we kind of kicked back off in autumn last year with the Reuse Summit. We're due to have another Reuse Summit in autumn this year, and really does what it says on the tin. We're trying to encourage the greater reuse of building materials in the construction industry, not only from a carbon reduction perspective, but also from a resource efficiency perspective, and obviously the impact that has on our biodiversity and natural capital. So how are we doing this? Very much around sharing and signposting. We do not want to reinvent the wheel. We want to make sure that we're gathering together what everybody else is already doing and kind of filling any gaps, holding events, both face-to-face and webinars like this one to help share that knowledge, do some deep dives in specific areas that are problematic. We're looking, particularly with Optima at the moment, doing a deep dive on glass partitioning. Then also doing some stakeholder mapping, again, around that knowledge sharing, and also doing blogs, case studies and documents. So any particularly interesting case studies or initiatives that you've got, please drop us a note and we can help you promote them and potentially feature them on our website. Just a real quick couple of slides on what the ASBP are. We're a not-for-profit mission-led organisation, a membership organisation. We've got about 150 members, and our mission is to accelerate the transformation to a healthy, low-carbon built environment by championing the use of demonstrably sustainable building products. So our members are really diverse, starting very much from the kind of product manufacturing side, but now we've got a lot of architects, engineers, consultants, contractors as part of our membership group. So really diverse group of people, which is great. And there's the 6 pillars there that we focus on throughout our work at the ASBP, of which one of them is resource efficiency, and obviously circular economy and reuse sits within that. The different events and engagements that we do, the research that we get involved with, I just encourage you to have a look at our website. Larry can post it in the chat for you to have a look at. but lots of different things you can get involved with. A lot of the information that we have on our website is free to access, because we're very much about bringing the whole industry along with what we're doing. And as I say, that knowledge sharing and signposting is really important part of what we do. A couple of the events that we have on an annual basis, we've got the annual ASBP Awards and then the Healthy Building Conference. As I said, we've got another Reuse Now summit coming up towards the end of the year as well. So yeah, hop onto the website and have a look and find out more. So I think what's quite interesting from my perspective with the pre-demolition audits, I think as with a lot of what's happening in sustainability and circularity and the circular economy, is a lot of this isn't really new. It's things that have been happening for quite a long time. I know Gilli, alongside Catherine at BRE, has been involved in pre-redevelopment and pre-demolition audits for decades, I'd suggest. So I think it's going to be really interesting. Hopefully something that we'll get out of the session today will be around why we've got to this kind of tipping point where all of a sudden there's a lot more engagement around these audits, and what value they can bring to actually demonstrating the economic feasibility of doing them, as well as the environmental and social value around it. So if I hand over to Gilli, if I stop sharing, if you can share your slides. Thank you very much, Gilli. You're just on mute, Gilli.
So hopefully you can see my slides.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, and thanks for inviting me to talk, Debbie. So looking forward to the rest of the presentations as well. So I'm sort of going to talk a little bit about the drivers and the standardization process, and some of the sort of key facets of pre-demolition audits. So I think, as Debbie, as you already alluded to, they've been around for quite some time. I'm not sure if I did the first pre-demolition audit, but it was a long time ago, 1996. So was it 28 years ago? Whilst at BRE, we did a pre-demolition audit prior to the building of the environmental building, which also used like 100% recycled aggregates and reclaimed bricks, etc. So I don't know if it's a bit depressing that it's still a bit of an exemplar, 28 years later, but that's where we are. And as Debbie, as you also said, the good news is that there's been a lot of acceleration of activity in circular economy, and also particularly in the area of requiring things like pre-demolition audits and circular economy statements in existing, but also looking at the new built environment. So that's really accelerated in the last few years. So that is good news. So I thought just start a little bit about why there has been this sort of acceleration in interest and activity in pre-demolition audits. So there are a number of drivers. So we're definitely seeing more client requirements. So here's an example from British Land in terms of their circular economy requirements, and you can see that the second one, so GSD 22, talks about carrying out a detailed pre-demolition materials mapping audit, and then use that audit to explore where materials can be reused on site or elsewhere. So this is very much sort of coming up the agenda in terms of developments from a client perspective. We want to sort of see, for an existing building or the existing assets, what we can actually salvage, what we can harvest from buildings or assets that are going to be demolished. But actually, prior to that, we've also got the driver, very, very strong driver from the GLA's circular economy statement, planning requirements. And actually, that takes it the stage before that, which is, do you actually need to demolish it at all? So this is where the pre-redevelopment audits look at the feasibility of retaining buildings, and that's not just a technical feasibility, it's also, is it able to be refurbished for alternative uses if the existing use is no longer required? But this hierarchy, I think this sort of pyramid shows very sort of clearly the prioritization of optioneering. So can you keep it? Can you retain it, retrofit it? Can you keep part of it? So we're seeing a lot of hybrid partial demolition, partial new build proposals at the moment. But then if that's not an option, and also in terms of the refurbishment and partial demolition options, even if there is retention, carry out pre-demolition audit to see what can actually be reused and what can be sort of higher value recycled. And this is particularly looking at the on-site reuse and reuse off-site. So this is, I think, one of the real reasons why pre-demolition audits are being very strongly affiliated with promoting reuse, is that it's a sort of the starting point to see what's available and identifying that reuse potential. Another driver, if we're looking more broadly in terms of EU, but also UK requirements and other countries, are the sort of building level sustainability standards. So BREEAM has for many years had requirements in there if you're going to take up the credits in relation to resources and materials recycling. You have to do the pre-demolition audit if there's an existing building on site. But it's also in terms of the refurbishment, pre-refurbishment, looking at scar assessment. And then the snapshot here is actually from Levels, which is an EU-led sustainability building standard, sustainable building standard, and that's actually built into EU taxonomy and green public procurement. So this snapshot here just shows one of the sort of micro level objectives, which is the resource efficient and circular material life cycles. And on the right, you can see there's a sort of clear requirement to do the bill of quantities and actually identify the construction, demolition, waste and materials in a much finer level of detail than perhaps we've been used to for the last few years. So another key driver is embodied carbon. Again, it's been recognised that reuse can reduce the embodied carbon in new developments quite significantly through effectively displacing new products and materials. But we then have to sort of make sure those products and materials do then become available for reuse. And this is again where the pre-demolition, the pre-refurbishment audits can be very useful to identify them. And it's it's not just reuse in the same development, it's also reusing for other developments. And perhaps there's not such a direct in terms of life cycle assessment. If you're looking at the same development, it's more difficult to demonstrate those additional benefits to other projects. But in looking at it globally, whatever's available for reuse from donor buildings that then finds a recipient building is going to reduce that embodied carbon at the life cycle stage of installation. So another driver is actually just the value of materials. I mean, materials, there's been a lot of price inflation of materials, also quite long lead-in times for certain materials. Myself and Catherine, we were doing some site visits early this week with our steel stockholders, and actually finding it quite difficult to get hold of certain products like steel products, and so the lead times are increasing. So this is where actually having this bank of products and materials is really important to consider, because you can obviously have those materials available, but also extract the value from those materials more effectively. So there's nothing wrong with recycling, but if you're able to reuse something, that's going to be normally it's going to be a higher value retention than recycling. And again, this is just a snapshot from a project that was involved with Meridian Water, with Enfield Council, where we really did try to sort of match the donor assets with the recipient projects as much as possible, because that way we're able to really extract the maximum value. And we sort of also developed a way of trying to understand what was that material value retention and making a difference between the on-site reuse versus off-site reuse versus higher value recycling versus lower value recycling. And increasingly, this is going to become much more important as the sort of price of materials and the availability of products and materials becomes more of an issue. So the pre-development audit process, so that's a sort of term that can cover pre-demolition, pre-renovation, pre-refurbishment. This was a code of practice that was developed, I think it was back in 2017 with BRE and also the industry group that's now affiliated with the CIWM. So there's a website address at the bottom. So really looking at these sort of 5 key areas and when to carry it out. So ideally as early as possible, so you can use the information. Who should carry out those audits? Ideally, sort of independent from the process, so they can actually be quite objective and say, well, okay, these could be the targets for reuse recycling. Then you have the procedure itself. Then you could produce some targets and measure the performance against those targets. And then it's really important to then communicate and report that. And perhaps the sort of stage 4 and 5 we're not quite so good at. It's not very often that we get to see what actually happened on demolition projects, for example, in relation to pre-demolition audits. And I think, you know, this is where I think Elodie will talk a bit later about the French system, where there's a sort of pre and post reconciliation, and that's really important to understand, you know, how realistic these audits are, but also where are the sort of real pinch points in terms of implementation. So in terms of the audits themselves, so I'm not going to go into this because I'm sure Elodie and Rob are going to talk about this in a lot more detail, where we get the information from to actually do this sort of calculation of what's in the building, but also given, you know, look at whether or not they're likely to be able to be reversed in terms of the connections, the quality, etc. You know, so we have to actually collect a lot of information to then combine that into these reports and into these spreadsheets to come up with these bills of quantities of products and materials, but then also a sort of an estimation of what could be reused and what could be recycled, and to what route. And then the data outputs, so they're, you know, increasingly these are being used for many things. So there are obviously the requirements are built into the client and the planning that I went through briefly earlier. But also, you know, we're finding that there's a lot of interest in having the embodied carbon counts, because obviously that could then feed into things like the whole life carbon assessments, where products will be able to be reused within the same development, for example. There's the whole aspect of material passports that's then associated with the products and materials coming out. I think Rob will talk about that in a bit more information, a bit more detail, as well as the exchange platforms where you can maybe export information to say, well, actually, these are available for reuse because we're not able to use them with our own developments or our own group portfolio of developments. And then it's very, very importantly, it's then a harvest map. So it's what can you actually harvest from those existing assets for new developments. So, so that's a sort of just very quick overview. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the standardization work that's going on. So there is a European, so CEN is the European standards body, or CENELEC, and there is a subcommittee that is circular economy in the construction sector. It's been going since 2021, so actually 3 years this year. Standardization work is not fast, so we're just at the point now of getting the draft document from working group 1, which is the framework definitions. We've carried out gap analysis and prioritization to see, you know, what are the further areas. And the parent group is the sustainability of construction work. So this is where like all the stuff about LCA of buildings and products, etc., is carried out. So there's a strong, obviously there's a very strong linkage to all that activity as well. So in terms of what's happened recently, so the recommendations from the gap analysis was to have 5 task groups. So looking at things like the data requirements, so material passports, the circularity assessments, so how do you measure like environmental, social, economic performance of circularity. The third one, which was a task group that I was leading on, was looking at pre-demolition audits and pre-redevelopment audits. The fourth one was looking at reuse, and then the fifth one is looking at design for circularity in the future, so future reuse, for example. So those all now at the stage where there's going to be a vote next week or couple of weeks to say whether or not they're going to be converted into working groups, and then they'll start standardization work. So there is a British, there's a BSI committee that is effectively the mirror committee of this European committee. So we're very fortunate in that we've got a great set of members who are volunteering to be on these task groups, and shortly we'll hopefully also be transferring to these working groups to effectively sort of feed in the UK experience, and also then communicate to our group and beyond what's happening at that European level, which, if the standards are produced, will then become a BS-EN standard, so it will become a British standard. So for the task group 3, which is pre-demolition, pre-redevelopment audit and evaluation, so our recommendation is effectively to set up a working group. But because there's a revision of an EU construction demolition waste protocol, which includes guidelines for pre-demolition and pre-renovation audits, our recommendation is to basically sort of just summarize, synthesize, and technical report all the great activity that's happening across Europe and potentially beyond in terms of national standards, etc. But also to look at this, at the guidance that's going to be in this revised protocol, and see whether or not there are any sort of areas that we need to provide a bit more detail. And then the last area is, like, because there's going to be other working groups set up, looking at things like reuse. So obviously, if we're going to be looking at a framework standard for reuse, a key area we're going to sort of be able to collecting information to feed into that is going to be the pre-demolition audit. So we want to sort of also have a mechanism of doing that alignment with these other working groups, so that we're not going to get loads of different data requirements for pre-demolition audit sort of coming out from these different standardization activities without there being a sort of coherence and coordination across that. So these are some of the national, regional requirements and standards. I'll also put it into I'll put the links in. I'm not sure how I'm assuming presentation will get distributed, so you'll be able to just look at these at your leisure. We're going to hear from Elodie on the second one down, which is, you know, quite groundbreaking in terms of being, not to say one of the first, but it's, you know, sort of having a national platform to collect information and to link into other things is a very good, I think it's a very good idea. And I've just said some light reading. It's obviously been quite sarcastic because it's probably not that light reading. But if you are really interested in this area, there is some really good guidance and links that are out there. And here, so the top ones are more from a European perspective, and the bottom for a really more the UK guidance and codes of practice. And right on the money, because I had a little alarm going off there, that's my presentation. So this is just this last one. So Reusefully obviously did quite a lot of pre-dem audits. So we did do a bit of a snapshot for 2023 in terms of, you know, the audited buildings. And I think you can see sort of the bottom second from the right, you can see actually there's a lot of material coming out just from the ones that we're looking at. So it is a huge opportunity to, you know, to optimize reuse and higher value recycling. The question is, you know, how do we do it as effectively as possible and make sure those recommendations for reuse and recycling are actually then carried through to implementation. So thank you very much, and I will stop sharing.
Thanks very much, Gilli. All really interesting stuff. I mean, it's good to see there's more momentum through the standardization, albeit, as you said, quite slowly. We're going to take questions at the end, so I'll move swiftly on to Elodie, please, if you can share your slides.
Yeah, can you see my slides?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, great. Hello, everyone. So I will talk to you about the national requirements that we have now for pre-demolition audits in France. So we call this type of audit the PEMD audits. Just quickly, before going into the details of that, I'm just a few words about the CSTB, so the Scientific and Technical Center for Building. So we have different types of activities. One is about research and expertise in the field of buildings, cities, products. And so basically we have some work for government, for example, to help towards new regulations. So that's how we are working on the PMD and PMD platform. Then we also do evaluation, so to assess some innovative solutions for buildings. We also have certification activities around products and services for buildings, and then diffusion of information. So we deliver a number of training courses and also publish some guidance about several innovative topics in buildings. And we also have a testing activity with different labs. So yeah, we are quite a big structure. And so we have a circular transition roadmap organized around three main axes. So the first one is about the knowledge of the urban material stocks and flows. So we try to understand the actual, so the current building stock, how many materials we will have to deal with in the next years. So how many demolition, renovation there will be, and how we need to think about dealing with the materials, like how we can reuse these materials or recycle or have the so enough infrastructure to deal with that. Then we focus on how to really use these existing resources in buildings which were not thought to easily reuse materials, for example. And so we are developing methodologies for reusing, so for characterizing materials and be sure that you can actually use them in new buildings. We also look at recycling issues and also about, so we help for the selective deconstruction and publish some guidance about that. And then, so the third axis is about how to anticipate circularity at design levels for products, buildings, or cities, so that you are prepared to deal with the topics we have issue with now, because it was not really thought for like reusing materials. And so basically it's about data, also about evolutivity of buildings, design for disassembly, and these type of things. So now let's talk about our topic today. So the PMD audit and platform. So we have in France a big law which is called Anti-Waste and Circular Economy Law. So it was in 2020, and it's multi-sector law. So we have really many new regulations for circularity in general. And so there are a few things about building industry. And so there is the Article 51, which is actually really effective since last July. But even before that, we could see some changes in the practices about product, equipment, materials, waste audits, because we knew it would come. So the sector has moved since maybe, so actually since 2020 it has started to move, because they knew it would actually happen. So the project owners are responsible of demolitions or significant rehabilitation for buildings which are more than 1,000 meters squared, have to do this PEMD audit, or it also works for some specific buildings with like polluting activities or this type of things. And so the content of the audit is basically to really put the accent on reuse. So you first look at your building as, so you don't look at your building as waste, which would be issued in the operation, but you really look at product, equipment, and materials to see what could be reused, and you have to do a whole list with different criteria of ease of disassembly, and is it in good condition, and is it are there existing people so companies who can deal with this to put that again on the market. And then you still need to do a whole audit as if everything was going to be waste, but then you need to find the best options for the waste. So, and of course you look at the waste hierarchy of treatments. So to try to maximize like recycling and this type of things when you can't reuse the materials, and you also need to identify the appropriate channels to deal with the waste. So then there is also requirements about competencies of the auditors. So they need to have skills in building techniques, construction economics, waste prevention, and management. And so now it's not so precise in the law, like there is no exact degree which makes that the auditor can audit, but there was a demand for having more precise, so more details about this qualification. And the Federation of Demolition Company has asked the CSTB to develop a training course to train the auditors to that. So it's like quite a big training course, and then there is a certification at the end to recognize that the auditor have the good methodology to do the audit. So it's not mandatory, but it's something which is often required to follow this training course. And so then what is interesting in the regulation is that you need to communicate about this audit. That's really an important point. So before the beginning of the works, and actually before you choose the contractor who will work on the demolition works, you need to submit the audit to the CSTB, and so then it will go on the platform, so which I will show you later. And so this helps to have so it can help to publish, for example, the products that you can have on your building, to say, yeah, I will have this demolition happening, so I will have this available. But then it also helps to have statistical feedback about all the things which are identified on the operations. And so for that, there is like an harmonized template which is used for all the operations to make sure that things communicate properly. So to reply to this communication objective, so there is the PEMD platform. So first, it's a tool just to make sure the project owners can meet the regulatory requirements. And then so it can help to ensure the visibility and accessibility of the PEMD audits. Before actually it needs to be done before the actual works, so the construction or renovation works, so that you can have chances to to actually have your things reused somewhere else if you communicate on that. And so then so it's also a tool for the public authorities if they want to control that the law is followed. And to develop the platform, so there was a involvement of the future user, so that the functionality are appropriate to the different users. And then, so the next point, which is very important, is that so you have this audit form that you need to post before the construction works, and then at the end of the works, there is the reconciliation form, which you need to send as well, so that you can compare what was in the audits and in the and what was actually done. So there are several user profiles in the platform. So there is like the project owner, which basically you can upload the data, so the forms. You can also have like a delegation from a consultant or someone like that, or also for the auditor who can upload the audits for the project owner. And then there is also an interesting functionality, for example, for companies who are specialized, for example, in reusing carpets. So if they are like cleaning and reconditioning carpets to put them back on the market, they can have some type of alerts if there are some carpets identified in the platform, and know that there will be a big quantity coming on some project. And then, so there is also an access for the Ministry of Ecological Transition and the ADEME, which is like a French body about environment and energy. And so this is for control and also statistics reports. And so if we look at the project phases, so basically you need to do so the audit as early as possible in the process, and then the actual requirement for posting the PEMD audit form is before application for urban planning authorization or the contractualization with demolition or renovation companies. So really it's so that the audit is actually used then in the works. And then, so you need to follow what happens during the works, and 98 days after the end of works, you need to upload the reconciliation form, so to check what was actually done. So in the platform, we have cartography functionality. So that just a screenshot this. Oh, so it wasn't not so yeah, you don't have that many things that you can see on this example, but basically so you can see the approximate location of things, so you can look for some elements, and then you can make a so you can ask basically project owner agrees to be put in contact with you if you are interested with this type of element, and so then it goes out of the platform and there is just a normal mail exchange, but then the project owner need to accept to be contacted, and so there is no precise details on the buildings addresses on the platform. And just to finish, so a few figures so far. So these are figures dated April 2024. So there were around 232 operations on the platform, and yeah, like half between renovation and demolitions. And what is interesting is that, so yeah, the platform was started really in last summer. So it was a bit slow at the beginning, but we have seen that many projects are coming now. And there is still, unfortunately, a possibility for people to just send the audit by email and not actually posting it on the platform, which makes that we don't have everything posted. So we really need to encourage people to put directly the audits on the platform. Otherwise, we need to implement them manually then in the platform. but yeah, so it was not possible to put also to force the use of the platform in the regulations. So it's you still have the two possibilities. Yeah, so thank you for your attention. So I think we can speak again about this in the QA session.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Elodie. Yeah, I think particularly interesting around the training, which still isn't mandatory, but obviously encouraged. And I think that's something that's been talked a bit more about in the UK as well. And I know we talked about this before as well, the initial audit, and then actually having that second audit to show what was done, to actually have that feedback process. I think is also an important part of it. I've got a question that I'll hold on to till the end on that one. Right then, if I could just pass on to Julius from Concular, who's up next.
Yes.
Are you okay to share your slides? And thank you very much for dropping in at the last minute. It was supposed to be Julius's colleague that was doing this presentation, so very much appreciated that you've been able to make yourself available.
Yeah, no problem. Maybe you can allow me to share my. I know it's working. Okay, now you can see me.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great. So yeah, I'm just jumping in for my colleague. So I hope I can go through his presentation without any issue. What we're doing is we are a group of now 65 people in Germany, and mainly working in the German-speaking market. And we have like engineers from the construction, environmental, and the software side. And our goal is basically to transform the building sector to be more circular, and to introduce pre-demolition audits, but also the trading of the materials until it's planned into new builds. We started 2020 basically with finding out what materials we can find in buildings. So defining a pre-demolition audit, or basically an audit if there's no demolition, also fine, but finding out what is there. And yeah, we did this really like step by step, went into buildings, tried to like catalogize everything that's there. And then with the time, we developed basically an app or a system behind that makes us faster in that, where we have specific forms for every type of building element, which specifications are needed for which case, and that makes it faster and also better to onboard new team members to start the process. We continued then by having kind of a process for that and tools for that, and then we started to standardize this process. I know there's always this topic of Germans are very standardized and everything, so we need a standard especially for the politicians to put that into their regulatory framework. So we decided to write it down and build an expert group for that, where we had big companies and cities and consultings and even legal advice to put that together into a standardized procedure, how we basically assess material for a further reuse of these elements. This is something that was published last year, and this year we already introduced it to some buildings in Berlin and Hamburg, Stuttgart as well, and we are like having a lot of initiatives to put that into the requirements for all buildings in Germany. So doing a lot of political work here. Basically the result of that is on one hand side an inventory of materials, but on the other side also a report where we show the different potentials that are coming with these materials, if they can be reused in a very high quality way. And the inventory basically is then part of a bigger software ecosystem that we built in the last couple of years. So where we not just have the source of pre-demolition audits and the inventories that are coming with that, but also connecting to the planning side to understand what buildings are actually planned, which materials they want to use, and to basically matchmake the demand coming from new projects with the supply we get from the audits and the materials from the deconstruction projects. We have some analysis and dashboards and whatever you need, but at the end, you have basically then different options to make decisions on the existing building, on your building stock and your portfolio, where you can say, I have a construction project here, I have a deconstruction project here. How can I get the materials there? And we help as well then to build them in again in a circular way, so they can be easily disassembled in the future. For that, we store this information in a building passport, which is on the one hand side a digital part, but on the other side, it also is connected to standards like the certification of the DGNB, which we have like as a kind of a first standard for building passports in Germany. So basically how it works, we're having like different information from an existing building and from a new building coming together as a material list, and then we put some analytics on it, so you can make better decisions on that. And then if you decide, okay, I want to deconstruct the building actually, then we connect it to the market on the other side, on the one hand side. So we have manufacturers and recyclers who can take back these materials and refurbish them. And on the other side, then to the building owner back to build it in the planned buildings. For that, we developed like a circularity performance index, we call it. So it's basically looking into the factors that we already see in the existing buildings that we also assess while doing an audit, but also calculating that for the new buildings. So you have an idea of how easy something is to deconstruct and how the building's performance is on the circularity aspects. Then for the very operative side, we started last year building up kind of storages, but more as a transfer storage. So it's not that we just put in materials that are coming out of the building. They need to have already a use, like a new building or something where it will be used. So it's just to balance out time issues between deconstruction and construction, and we are now building more of them in Germany. Another thing that is always coming is the type of warranty and insurance and security or assurance in that field. So for that, we worked on a white paper for reclaimed construction material insurance together with the Circular Building Council. And this was published as a white paper beginning of the year. And right now we're in the second phase to implement this insurance with a big insurance company in Germany. Last but not least, we also see that there's a lot of need for networking and bringing like building new value chains for all these materials. So we launched a partner program where we work closely together with planners, with manufacturers, with project developers, and building or construction companies, general contractors, and consulting companies, and so on. So here you can basically see what we plan for this year. So we have bold plans on creating more of these storage facilities. We are right now talking with a lot of cities to establish them, and then it will become much more efficient and easier to trade materials and basically get more materials back in the loop. So when when someone decides to tear down the building or even partly tear it down, then we bring the materials, for example, on our shop, which where you can see here some projects that we assessed, and a lot of these materials then come to the shop and can be traded and found by architects and brought back to new projects, or so we basically make it transparent what materials we find, and you can buy them, and then we care about the logistics. So we deconstruct the materials after they've been sold, and care about everything in between so they can be built in again. I have like just 2 examples. I have some more in like additional slides, but maybe we don't have time for that. So here 2 examples. One is from a supermarket where we took out the wooden beams and then brought it to a manufacturer who built these nice building blocks out of small pieces of wood, and basically they built again another building with that. Then another example from office to office. So we have taken out, for example, these separation, these partition walls, and then cared about the logistics and the storage, and build it in again, and you get another nice office with reused partition walls. Actually, we work together with the manufacturer here, so the manufacturer tested them, get them a new painting and some refurbishment, and in addition a 5 years warranty. So there's actually no reason to not do it, because the result is looking like a new one. So, yeah, here's some examples of buildings that we work with. It's around 400 buildings that we worked with in the last 4 years. And there's a stadium, there's a education center, the building of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, which is like a big newspaper, and some universities, hotels, office buildings. So this is mainly the type of building that we are looking for, which is like a bigger building. So we have enough material of the same quality, of the same size, of the same type. So you don't have to puzzle your new build out of very various and different materials. We digitized around 5 million square meters in Germany in that time, which is around 1.5% of the deconstruction projects in Germany, and had like over 400 projects, and there's circulated already a lot of materials back into the loop. Yeah, that's it from my side. I don't know, do you have some more time? And I could show also some more examples, but anyway, otherwise I'm open for questions then afterwards.
I think it would be great to see some other examples, but we're just a little bit pushed for time. So if you could stop sharing, and I think if everybody's happy to, we're going to circulate the slides afterwards. So by all means, if you can include some more of your case study examples in your slides, Julius, we can circulate those to everybody.
Sure.
So Rob, if you wouldn't mind doing your presentation, that would be great.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. You can see my to-do list, but this is probably what you want to see. Can you see, just go to the top, see those slides?
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Great. Okay, thanks for having me. Some really interesting presentations to follow up on there. So yeah, interesting to hear what's been going on in the continent and what's coming with the legislation in the UK as well. So yeah, I'm Rob Smith. I'm from Material Index, and I'm going to be talking a bit about pre-demolition audits in the UK. So the perspective on this side and our kind of journey as a company where we've been sort of digitizing this process. So who are Material Index? Well, we're a small team. We're quite a new business, small team of engineers, architects, software developers and contractors. And yeah, we're focused on helping the construction industry decarbonize through material reuse. So we do this by focusing on pre-demolition audits to help companies, businesses in the construction sector identify value from the materials in their stock as early as possible. And we offer some kind of bespoke brokering services as well. Personally, I'm a mechanical engineer by background. I actually worked offshore in the oil industry for the start of my career. So I was on the platforms and involved in some of the decommissioning of some of the Brent platforms, so sort of 30,000 ton oil rig going for dismantling and recycling in Hartlepool. So I know that oil and gas is kind of the antithesis of what we stand for here at ASBP, but I feel I'm repenting for my sins. So I left that industry and I moved into property development, started doing schemes up in Cumbria and Manchester, and that's where I became aware of the kind of issue with waste in construction and materials coming out that had a technical life left in them, but nowhere to go. And I was sort of manually selling these things on Facebook Marketplace and eBay and Gumtree, or selling them to contractors however possible. And that led me to meet Morgan, who's my co-founder at Material Index, and he's an architect who's been dealing with reuse and from the demand side and wanting to reuse more materials, but just struggling to there's no supply chain, so just struggling to do it. So we formed Material Index. Brian Ellis, he's an architect turned software developer, and he's worked in construction for Wix, the home store. So he was developing applications for Wix and how they deal with their kitchen installers essentially, and getting those built. So we're all from a construction background. And I guess the reason I mentioned that when it comes to pre-demolition audits is we've heard from Elodie and Gilli, there's a certain amount of sort of competence that's required when you're doing a pre-demolition audit. So I'm just going to talk a bit about the problem, just reiterate. I'm sure people on this call are aware, preaching to the converted, but it's always good just to revisit the fact that half of UK landfill comes from construction waste. Embodied carbon in construction materials accounts for around 12 to 14% of global emissions from the replacement of materials in buildings, and reuse rates are quoted anywhere between 2 and 6%. I think there's a question around the reference for those. I think the 6% is from Arup, 2% is from BRE. And refit cycles are just becoming more frequent. So lease cycles are increasing, and the churn of materials coming out of buildings is just increasing and making this problem worse. So we've seen, as we've been swimming around in this space, a big demand for reuse materials. We're seeing it starting to happen. We can see from the two presentations before us that on the continent, this is already happening. It's fair to say they're probably ahead of us in the UK, but it is starting to happen at scale. There is a demand, and this has been driven by embodied carbon regulation. And we're seeing some great innovation in the space, from design, from these various exchange platforms that exist, and the sort of technologies for recovery. So this is a great example from a project in Copenhagen, where they were actually cutting out sections of wall to use as facade panels. Quite extreme, but there was decent carbon saving there. There's also examples in Europe of buildings where there's been up to sort of 80% reuse material adopted. So it just shows what really can be done when the effort's put in. But we believe essentially this is like a supply constrained market. And we started to see that, yeah, early adopters are starting to audit their own stock in buildings and reuse them in their portfolio. So in terms of the opportunity, this is sort of something we like to talk about. We use bricks as an example because we love to build with bricks in the UK. We build with about 2.6 billion bricks every year. It's quite staggering, but we import most of those and we demolish around 2.3 billion. So there's around 100 million that are actually sat in yards available for reuse. So we know we can't reuse all bricks, but there's an opportunity to reuse a lot more than we currently do. And a brick carries a lot of carbon. So there's a huge opportunity. And that's just one of many product types where there's an opportunity for reuse. So yeah, if we're going to realize this opportunity around reuse, then we first need to start understanding what is in buildings and think about the waste hierarchy more in terms of the circular economy, which I'm sure everyone in this call is familiar with. So yeah, we need to move as much away from sort of recycling to more towards closing that loop more tightly to the reuse side of things. And basically doing a PDA, doing a pre-demolition audit, pre-refurbishment audit allows you to do that. It's kind of the thin end of the wedge into reuse, providing an inventory of materials with key data attached to it. And so these are something that's been done for quite a long time, traditionally by demolition contractors. If you sort of describe what a pre-demolition audit is to someone at the Institute of Chartered Waste Engineers, they'll say, oh yeah, we've been doing those for years. That's a waste management plan. And so demolition contractors have been doing these as a matter of course to understand just what's coming out of a building. So they know how many skips they need to order to handle that waste. But the focus is much more now with the circular economy on actually not all that material should be waste. It should be going for reuse and repurposing and alternative pathways. And so it's starting to enter the planning system. And we're seeing now in the GLA for certain planning applications, it's mandatory to have a PDA. And if a developer wants to achieve BREEAM or certain green building credentials, they can get points towards that through having a pre-demolition audit done. But most importantly, rather than just being a tick box exercise, like I say, is that thin end of the wedge into reuse, which is what we're really trying to achieve with this. So if you were to Google pre-demolition audits in the UK, it's maybe different if you did it in France or Germany, as we've seen, they're a bit more ahead. There's a kind of mismatch of information. There's some great stuff from the London Plan. BRE have really put out some great content with their code of practice for pre-demolition audits. You might see something from Swaco. Of course, there's Reusefully, have been around for a long time. You might see some pie charts. So there's a lot of kind of distributed information around pre-demolition audits, but it's not all consolidated. So it's great to see the presentation from Gilli about how that's hopefully going to become more standardized. But what we basically did as a company last year, we really sort of started swimming around in all this information and trying to sort of make sense of it and establish what is the best in class pre-demolition audit. And we found that there's a whole range of audits out there. So I'm just going to nip through a few examples of the sorts of things you might see. This is the template from BREEAM. So if you're trying to achieve credits with BREEAM, this is the template that they provide you. So it's kind of European waste categories, the key groups, estimate on tonnage, and where there's recycling or reuse opportunities. This is an example from a quite large demolition contractor in the UK, and we've spoken to many demolition contractors, and you get the whole gambit from them. You get the whole range from companies that have a dedicated sustainability team who are dedicated to doing pre-demolition audits. You've got some who might just have one person in the company and that's just their job, but most we speak to don't, and they will just allocate a resource as and when, and that might just involve half a day on site and a kind of finger in the air estimation on what the materials are and the quantities. And we've seen kind of orders of magnitude difference in some of the estimations. Sometimes the estimators do it; they might not have been to site. So there's a whole range from quite detailed to sort of kind of finger in the air estimations. Another example. This is a very detailed pre-demolition audit. Can you still hear me? I've just frozen a bit. Just doing a sound check. Thumbs up if you can hear me, Debbie. Good. Okay. Sorry, I just thought I froze for a minute. So yeah, Pre-demolition audit from Marks Barfield. So these guys have really been pioneering. So I think, yeah, shout out to Darcy and Julia and their team who have really done a deep dive. You've maybe seen their presentation before at ASBP. They've really gone into detail on the pre-demolition audits to really understand what could be reused and actually made things happen, got fire doors and all sorts of things reused. And they're super open and transparent with their data. So they've been, you know, a great body for us to kind of collaborate with and learn from. So yeah, grateful to them. Definitely reach out if you want more information from them. And so I'm going kind of fast just to stay on time here. So what have we done at Material Index? We swam around in this space for a long time, tried to understand what was involved. And we started going to sites and because we were doing this from a reuse perspective, we took the view that we needed to catalog component by component or system by system and capture as much detail as possible to make it data rich and really provide that sort of material passport data and enable more reuse. This was taking us, we were taking a good week on site for a sort of standard office, so a full week on site and then probably another week plus writing up what we'd found and doing calculations and post-processing. And it was a painful prep period where there were a few very late nights, sort of 2 a.m. in the office, trying to put these audits together. But it was a great learning exercise for us to understand what was valuable and what wasn't. And it became clear to us that this process needed to be digitized for it to be scalable. So we gradually started building out a platform where you could put this data in straight away, and we were capturing pictures. We'll tag it with a name. We'll give it a uni class. We'll categorize by BCIS category. We'll give it the location of the building, a quantity, a weight, a volume, European Waste Code category, the condition, the fixings, dimensions. We were doing a lot of dimensioning earlier on, and then we sort of later realized that's not always necessary for certain products. Manufacturer information, reuse potential, and of course carbon. So this was the sort of data we were collecting, and we started digitizing this process. And that was really initially just to reduce this kind of audit time on site and the post-processing, but also to help us with the quantification. We were doing a lot of kind of manual calculations, and we realized we could easily build that into the digital process. And the other main thing is what we realized is these projects, they evolve over time. So handing over a PDF at a moment in time, things will change, and you want to be able to update it easily. And you also want to cater to all the different stakeholders involved. So different stakeholders want different information. Some want carbon information. Some wants to know about the steel. Some want to know about the reuse potential. So we wanted to cater to all that, basically. So we've developed this platform. The way our platform works is you upload a plan of the building, you mark out a space, and you start walking through that space and tagging items to locations in the building. It will calculate areas, it will calculate quantities of carpet tiles. So it's automating the process as much as possible. And then it's producing this catalog of item by item, all the materials in the building. So it's assimilating from all the rooms you've been in, what all the materials are in that building, and assimilating them into this table, tagged with all the useful information. And then on this page, we invite the professional team to come in and collaborate and start making decisions on those materials. And they might see things they hadn't expected, like, okay, there's some really nice doors in this scheme that we hadn't thought about reusing, but maybe we will. And so this is where the kind of collaboration aspect comes in. And then once you set your pathways for the materials, that feeds into the analytics for the platform. And what we found useful here is having a digital platform, and you can start running scenarios. So what if you decide actually you want to retain the steel frame? How does that affect your carbon? And you can start offering scenario planning for your clients. So I'm going a bit fast because I'm just conscious of time here. So yeah, you can get real granular data on, okay, for that component, sorry, that material category, what actually makes up, or that ceramic material, where does it all come from? And because we've captured it on a component level, we can really give that granular data. So that's a kind of whistle-stop tour of our platform. And I guess just to reiterate why we see these pre-demolition audits are so valuable is if you consider the kind of current model for materials coming out of buildings. Traditionally, what happens is you go to a building site, the demolition contractors will do their work and then pick through what is potentially of value, and most of this goes to waste and some of it is reclaimed, and that's what's been happening for years. But by getting in early, as we've talked about in the previous presentation, by getting in early and understanding early what's in the building, you can start making decisions much earlier and actually making decisions on those pathways and materials before the deconstruction happens, and that can even get built into the tender, and that should really enhance the reuse rates from deconstruction. I think that's essentially my last slide. The tool we have available, I saw a question in the chat. We're now starting to make this tool available to other people. We don't necessarily want to be the ones doing all of the audits. We want other people to be indexing their buildings. That's the only way we're really going to get this reuse happening at scale. So we're trying to take feedback on the platform and put it in the hands of demolition contractors, developers, building owners, whoever it is might be interested in logging the materials in their buildings. So that's a very whistle-stop tour of our journey for the last sort of year and a half.
Thanks very much, Rob. So before we get on to the questions, Emily, if you're there to give a bit of a take on where British Land are at with their pre-demolition and pre-redevelopment audits. I think you've just got just one slide as a kind of a talking point. Are you there, Emily? Oh, there we go. Can't hear you. Larry, is there something that we need to change?
No.
You might need to try going out and coming back in again, Emily. It might be one of the initial settings, I think, when you, yeah. I have just answered a couple of questions in the chat. One was about the US seeming to be more focused on residential and the UK seeming more focused on commercial sector. I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, but I think in my experience, it seems to be because of the social housing net in the UK and Europe. I think that the states have had to very much do the reuse of materials out of necessity. So a lot of the Dave Benink and a lot of the work they've been doing around deconstruction and reuse has been to supply into that housing, individual person's housing market as much as anything else. And then I think it's more commercial oriented in Europe due to the carbon emission savings would be my take on that. I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to comment on that just while waiting for Emily to come back in.
Hi, sorry, I can't open my video again. It's stopped. So I don't know if Larry can restart it. Yeah, so just to add to that, so Reusefully, we actually did an Innovate UK project a couple of years ago, and it was called Pre-Dem, that was focused on social housing. And we actually did talk to quite a few social housing providers as part of that work. And I think that it was very clear that a lot of them are just not even, it's just not on their radar at all to look at circular economy, let alone then implement it through things like pre-demolition audits and pre-refurbishment audits. Whereas the commercial sector, they're having to, when I went through the drivers, there's several drivers that are very targeted in the commercial sector, which is planning. Though we have done quite a few pre-dem audits that include housing, and because they're part of the planning application, but also BREEAM and client requirements. So I think that's probably in the UK are other reasons why there's more focus on commercial versus residential. Though that isn't to say there haven't been quite a few residential pre-dems, but they tend to be part of like the planning application rather than social housing providers. I think Enfield, they did a few. There's a few of the local authorities where the local authority led social housing have been doing, have been implementing them.
Okay. Thank you. Emily, are you? Oh, still can't hear you. Oh, what a shame. We'll see if Larry can do any tweaking in the background. If we just move on to one of the other questions. I think AI has come up from a how this can work with the pre-demolition audits. I think possibly product and material recognition as part of that. And also the same person has commented to Elodie to say, would an AI enhanced platform allow for data from the demolition audits to be automatically shared with platforms in an easier way? So I don't know if perhaps Elodie wants to comment on that first, and if anybody else can come in about AI facilitating the audits.
Yeah, then I think definitely we need some tools to facilitate the audits because it's a big work, and then so currently there is a lot of things to be done manually, so more or less manually. So I would say any tools can help. So maybe AI, but maybe that's not the only way again. So yeah, there are different ways to facilitate that. So far, the tools that we have in France to help to do the pre-demolitions audit, they are not really based on AI. So they are still quite, so they facilitate work, but they are still not ideal to have everything done quickly. So I'm very curious about seeing a solution which really helps to save a lot of time. But so the tools which are existing, they really help to do the measurings, the identification of materials on site, and then to gather the data in a form which you can upload on the platform. So the platform has been sold already to communicate with other tools. So there is like a CSV file that the tools can produce to be connected to the platform to ease this completion. But like there is no magic solution today, so that it's super easy.
Yeah, I can maybe give some comment on that as well. So we tried for a year to prototype something with computer vision to identify the building elements. But there's, I think we stopped at some point because basically you can get, I think, in a reasonable time to the point where you kind of count and identify the type of product. So is it a window, is it a door, or something like that? But then on the other side, you have so many different elements in a building, and they can be of also very custom shapes. So it's really a big project to train AI on that, and it's also very expensive. I mean, you need years with a team of developers to get to a solution that is more or less accurate. And if there's one error, one thing that is not recognized the right way, you have to find it in that building or in that list, in that result, and then correct it. And you have more work in correcting than the AI to than doing it actually manually. So I think this is a very interesting space, and maybe we'll find this. We will see some solutions in a few years, but right now I think this is a very complex topic.
Thanks, Julius. I think Emily might be able to. Oh, still can't. I think Larry was saying you were trying without your headphones. I'm so sorry, Emily. What a shame. Okay. Let's go on to another question.
You know sign language, Emily.
I know. Oh dear. Well, hopefully we can post some of Emily's comments around. Maybe we can just do a bit of a quick Zoom call with her after, just to do a little bit of an interview snapshot that we can actually post then and share with everybody's slides, because I think it's invaluable to get you know, British Land's taken all of this as a client. It's such a shame the technology is not playing ball. Okay, I think there's a couple of kind of more economic type of questions. One literally saying, has anybody been able to realise a cost benefit through the reuse of building materials, i.e. the economy part of circular economy? But I think in conjunction with that, around from a manufacturer's perspective, what kind of competitive advantage have they got to get involved in the reuse market? Again, kind of on that economic side of things. There was another one as well, but if we perhaps oh yeah, cost and timescales. So how does that get impacted if some of the materials need to be tested? So in terms of materials testing, in terms of what benefits a manufacturer might see of getting involved in reuse. If anybody's got any particular comments on that kind of more financial side, that would be great. Thank you.
Well, maybe I can just pick up on the last one, and I'd quite like to hear from Julius a bit more about the insurance scheme anyway, because I think that sounds really interesting. But as I went through some of the standardization task groups, and there is one that's going to be set up, a working group that was set up on reuse framework, and actually as part of that, so some of the key aspects of that will be about testing and demonstrating technical performance for reuse in different applications. This is going to get quite techy, so I apologise in advance. So the way the standards work, we have product technical committees. So for concrete, you know, for concrete products, for steel products, etc. So even if there's a reuse standards is produced at that framework level, like holistically across construction products and reuse, that will be a sort of certain level of detail, and then the real detail will then have to come in from these different product technical committees, because they have to then update the standards effectively for you know, for steel, for concrete. And what's happened very recently is that's just what's happened for steel. So obviously we are seeing a lot of steel reuse, but now it's being almost like ratified at a European level through development of a European standards for reuse of steel. And then another standard that's underway is then for designers to work with reuse steel. So you know, because of the fact that we work in the construction sector, and we have to make sure that the technical performance, etc., is in fitness for purpose, then we do have to go through that process. But in the meantime, and I'm sure both Rob and Julius have got more you know, more information in terms of how you then sort of almost bridge that gap to demonstrate technical performance and match, you know, what's coming out with potential applications.
Thanks, Gilli. Anybody else want to comment specifically kind of on the economic side before Julius perhaps brings in? Yeah, go on, Rob.
I mean, I can just mention some experience from sites where we have brokered. I guess the manufacturers, it's difficult. A lot of them claim to have take-back schemes and to deal with secondary materials, but the reality is they often don't. It's hard to get them involved, and if they do, they'll charge a lot for it. So we've been in sites where they have take back like ceiling panels, for example, but the client really had to lean on them to reduce the cost for taking them back. But it depends on products. There's other products that we do sell out of sites that we will fetch value for. So I always kind of put it into three categories. You've got the items that there is already a kind of market for and people will buy, and we know the price, and that's quite limited. You've got the things in the middle where, yeah, technically they could be reused, but you probably need a bit more time, and maybe storage is a bit more difficult and the economics more dubious. And then the things that technically could be reused, but in reality don't. And yeah, the reality is it's still a small percentage of stuff that's getting sold economically, but we feel with time, more things will move into that first category. We feel strongly about that. 5 years ago, raised modular flooring was all getting binned, and now it's getting reused. So we feel strongly that in future there will be more and more stuff where it's economical to reuse. And I guess on the recertification, we did a lot with resellers, so we kind of let them handle that. We do get involved with helping for like brick testing and as and when required on certain products. but yeah, that's a question that comes up a lot around re-warrantying and so on. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. So we just one last couple of minutes, Julius, if you've got anything else to add on the insurance piece, because I think that is definitely something that comes up a lot when you're talking about reuse.
Yeah, I think there are different approaches to insurance. One is the approach to insure the product itself. So yeah, to have like a product insurance is something I think that Cycle Up in France is also doing already for longer. We decided to look at basically the building owners who who build something and want to introduce like reclaimed materials to that new build, and they are like unsure about the quality and the see some risks here in reusing reclaimed materials. So we wanted to lower down this barrier and decided to draft basically an insurance module that is on top of the building insurance, and where these materials are insured in addition. So if there, for example, there's some water leakage, or I don't know, yeah, there might be quality problems, then the insurance is covering that. So this is the way how we took it. As said, there are different solutions that have to come together at the end. Yeah, and this was the core that we worked on. And if you want to actually, so I guess there are people in my team that could tell you all the details, but this is also a long story then. So if you want to read about it, it's in English, this white paper. You can download from our website. I posted the link somewhere in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, the link was in the Q&A and I've just popped it in the chat as well. Well, I think in the interest of finishing pretty much on time, we have got a lot of questions in there. If the panel are okay with me doing that, I'll circulate the rest of the questions. If they want to just jot down any of the thoughts on the questions, we can circulate that as part of the pack when we circulate the slides. And just remains to say thank you very much to all of our panelists. Very much appreciate your time getting involved in this, and sorry again, Emily, that we couldn't get you to participate as we wanted to, but hopefully we can get a Zoom meeting organized with you just to get your thoughts on this that we can include with the pack when we send it out to everybody. So yeah, thank you very much, and we'll circulate everything shortly and hope to see you on another ASBP webinar soon.